They told her no man would marry a widow with 4 children, especially not one whose skin marked her as different in a town that barely tolerated difference. Violet Washington had heard the whispers behind gloved hands at church, seen the pitying looks when she walked Main Street with her brood trailing behind like ducklings. The good women of Silver Creek spoke uncertainties about her future, none of it kind. The morning Kane Morrison came calling, those certainties crumbled like old paper. Dawn light slanted through cottonwood leaves as hoofbeats drummed against hard earth. Violet stepped onto her porch, wiping flour from her hands. 4 riders sat their horses in her yard. The leader wore his hat low, shadow cutting across features that belonged in wanted posters. Mrs. Washington. Kane touched his brim with mock courtesy. Come to discuss your situation. Behind her, footsteps scattered. Sarah's voice, sharp, with fear, gathering the younger ones. James appeared at Violet's shoulder, 14, and trying to fill his father's space. His hand found the rifle by the door. Got no situation needs discussing. Violet's voice carried the weight of mountains, steady as stone. Kane's smile held no warmth. See, that's where you're wrong. This land's got potential, more than a woman alone can handle. Managing just fine. Are you? His gaze swept the patched roof, the sagging fence. 4 mouths to feed. Winter coming. Accidents happen in these parts. The word accidents hung in the air like smoke. Samuel's face flashed through her mind. The cave-in that took him, the way the mine foreman couldn't meet her eyes at the funeral. Kane leaned forward in his saddle. Got papers here, fair price, more than fair, considering. Considering what? Considering you got no husband to protect what's yours. The threat sat naked between them now. Violet felt her children's fear pressing against her back, their breathing shallow in the morning quiet. Marcus, barely 6, made a sound like a wounded animal. Kane's hand drifted toward his gun. 3 days, Mrs. Washington. Think it over real careful. The rifle shot split the air clean. Kane's horse reared. The other riders wheeled, hands moving to weapons. From the tree line rode a man Violet had seen in town. Dr. Thompson, they called him. Quiet man with gentle hands and eyes that held too much knowing. He sat his horse easy, rifle across his lap. Medical bag hung from his saddle horn like a promise of healing in a world bent on breaking things. Lady gave you her answer. His voice carried the kind of quiet that made loud men listen. Kane steadied his mount. This ain't your concern, Doc. Made it my concern. The silence stretched thin as wire. Kane's men looked to him, waiting. Violet held her breath, counting heartbeats. Sarah's hand found her arm, gripped tight enough to bruise. Kane spat into the dust. You just bought yourself a world of trouble. Wouldn't be the first time. Something in Thompson's tone made Kane's eyes narrow. Recognition flickered there. Or maybe just calculation. The kind men do when measuring their chances against another man's will. Kane gathered his reins. 3 days, Doc, for both of you. They rode out hard, dust trailing like a curse. Thompson waited until the sound faded before moving his horse closer. In daylight, Violet could see the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried weight that wasn't visible. You hurt? His gaze swept her children, professional and thorough. No. She studied his face, looking for motives. Men didn't risk their lives for strangers, not in her experience. Why? He considered the question, rifle still ready across his lap. Right thing to do. Right don't keep a man alive out here. Neither does wrong. Marcus broke free from Sarah's grip, edging closer to the strange man on the horse. Thompson's expression softened, the hard lines smoothing into something almost gentle. You're the doctor. Marcus's voice held wonder. You made my fever go away. That's right. Are you coming back? Thompson looked at Violet, question in his eyes. She saw something there that made her chest tight. Not pity. Not the calculating look men got when they weighed her burdens against her worth. Something else entirely. If your mama says it's all right. The words hung between them, layered with meanings Violet couldn't name. Her children watched, waiting. Sarah's grip on her arm loosened, curiosity replacing fear. James stood straighter, measuring the man who'd stood with them when trouble came calling. Violet thought of the whispers, the certainties spoken in parlors and churches. No man would want a widow with 4 children. No man would choose such complications willingly. She looked at Thompson, sitting patient as stone while her world tilted on its axis. "All right," she said. 3 months before Kane Morrison's ultimatum, Ezra Thompson had ridden into Silver Creek carrying ghosts. The town spread before him like a promise half-kept. False-fronted buildings lined a dusty main street. Mountains rose beyond, purple with distance and possibility. He'd been searching for 3 years, following whispers and rumors, chasing a dead man's words across territories that stretched endless as regret. The livery stable owner eyed his horse, his clothes, the military bearing he couldn't quite shed. "Passing through? Looking to stay? Town need a doctor?" "Could use one. Doc Henley passed last winter." Ezra paid for a stall, shouldered his saddlebags. Inside lay his instruments, his certificates, and a leather journal he never opened in daylight. The weight of it pressed against his ribs like unfinished business. His first patient came that evening. A woman's voice desperate through his clinic door. "Please, sir, my boy's burning up." She stood in lamplight holding a child who hung limp as cloth. Behind her, 3 other children, clustered in the doorway. The woman's face held the kind of strength that comes from carrying too much alone. "Bring him in." She laid the boy on Ezra's examination table. Fever radiated from the small body like heat from stones. As Ezra worked, something caught his eye. A family Bible on the shelf, open to pressed flowers between its pages. Next to it, a military commendation. The name stopped his breath. Samuel Washington, Buffalo soldier, killed in action. His hands trembled as he continued the examination. The boy's breathing eased as the medicine took hold. Color returned to small cheeks. The woman's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you." Ezra couldn't meet her eyes. "What's his name?" "Marcus." "I'm Violet Washington." The name hit him like a physical blow. Samuel's voice echoed across 3 years of guilt and searching. "Tell my Violet I tried to come home. Tell her I never stopped loving her and those babies." "Ma'am." He managed the words through a throat gone tight. She gathered Marcus in her arms, the other children pressing close. Sarah, the oldest, watched Ezra with suspicious eyes. James stood protective at his mother's shoulder. Mary clutched, a worn doll. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Boy just needed rest and medicine." Violet's gaze sharpened. Men didn't work for free in her world, not without wanting something in return. "I'll bring payment tomorrow." "No need." She left with her children, but her wariness lingered in the room like smoke. Ezra sat alone with his ghosts, staring at the Bible where Samuel's memory pressed between pages like autumn leaves. The next morning brought gossip with the sunrise. Mrs. Patterson from the Mercantile arrived with a cut finger and a tongue loose with information. "That's the Washington widow you treated last night. Poor thing's been struggling since Samuel died in that mine accident. 4 children and no prospects." She winced as Ezra cleaned the wound. "Some say she's cursed. Lost her husband, lost her savings when the mine company refused to pay death benefits. Now she takes in washing and helps with birthing babies. Seems capable enough. Oh, she works hard, too hard, some might say. But what man would take on such a burden? 4 mouths to feed and barely keeping that homestead together." Ezra bandaged her finger with precise movements. Maybe the right man wouldn't see it as a burden. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "You thinking of courting, doctor? Violet Washington's a handsome woman, I'll grant you. But she comes with complications. Most worthwhile things do. That afternoon, Ezra rode to the Washington homestead. He told himself it was a medical follow-up, nothing more. But his saddlebags held more than medicine. Books for the children, soap that smelled of lavender, a small wooden horse carved during sleepless nights. Violet met him at the gate, wariness written in the set of her shoulders. Marcus is fine. Fever broke this morning. Good to hear. Brought a few things. He handed down the packages, watching her face. For the children. Sarah examined the books with hungry eyes. Mary cradled the soap like treasure. Marcus found the wooden horse and held it to his chest. Only James held back, torn between gratitude and loyalty to a dead father's memory. Why? Violet's question cut through the children's chatter. Ezra looked at the homestead, seeing Samuel in every careful repair, every planted row. Because they need them. That's not an answer. He met her gaze, steady as he could manage with secrets burning in his chest. Sometimes it's the only one a man's got. Over the following weeks, Ezra found reasons to return. Marcus's cough that needed checking. Mary's scraped knee that required cleaning. James's split lip from a school fight that needed stitching. Each visit, he stayed a little longer. Fixed a loose board. Helped with chores too heavy for women's hands. The town noticed. Whispers followed him down Main Street. Speculation bloomed in parlors and church pews. The mysterious doctor and the struggling widow. Some called it charity. Others saw calculation in his kindness. But late at night, alone in his clinic, Ezra opened his journal to sketches of buffalo soldiers. Samuel's face stared back from the pages, alive in charcoal and memory. The pressed flower from Samuel's last letter lay between the leaves, twin to the one in Violet's Bible. He was falling in love with Samuel's wife. Samuel's children, the life his friend had died protecting. The guilt tasted like copper in his mouth. One evening, as autumn painted the cottonwoods gold, Ezra found Sarah waiting by his clinic door. 16 and fierce, she held his journal in her hands. You knew him. Not a question. An accusation. The journal fell open to Samuel's sketch. The resemblance between father and daughter was unmistakable. Same stubborn jaw, same eyes that missed nothing. Yes, you knew my father, and you never said. Ezra's hands hung empty at his sides. No excuse would make this right. No explanation would ease the betrayal in her voice. He saved my life. Sarah's grip tightened on the journal. Tell me. So he did. About the patrol that went wrong. The sniper in the rocks. Samuel's body slamming into his, pushing him clear of the bullet meant for his chest. About the promise made to a dying man who whispered his family's names like prayers. That's why you came here. That's why you're courting Mama. Started that way. The admission felt like removing splinters from his soul. Not anymore. Sarah studied his face, looking for lies, finding only truth and the weight of carrying it alone. Does she know? No. You have to tell her. I know. Sarah closed the journal, holding it like evidence of his crime. She deserves better than secrets. She deserves better than me. Maybe. Sarah's voice softened, just a fraction. But you're what we've got. She handed back the journal and walked away, leaving Ezra alone with his ghosts and the terrible certainty that some truths would destroy everything he'd built from the ashes of his guilt. Winter came early that year, and with it the conspiracy that had been growing in shadows finally showed its teeth. The cottonwood where Samuel had married Violet stood bare against November sky. Its branches reached toward heaven like prayers, carved in bark. Ezra knelt beneath it, ring burning in his palm like a coal. Violet Washington. His voice caught on her name. Will you marry me? She stood frozen, wind pulling at her shawl. The ring was simple silver, honest as the man offering it. But his eyes held something else. A weight that spoke of secrets still carried, truths still buried. Why? The question came soft as snowfall. Because I love you. Because I love them. He nodded toward the house where her children waited. Because Samuel would want his family protected. The name hung between them like a bridge neither had crossed. Violet's breath caught. You speak of him like you knew him. Ezra's silence stretched long as winter nights. Truth pressed against his ribs, demanding release, but cowardice held his tongue. I know he was a good man. I know he loved you. Not lies, not truth. Something worse than both. Violet took the ring with trembling fingers. Yes. That night, she wore it by lamplight, watching silver catch the flame. Sarah sat beside her, 16 and wise beyond her years. Something's not right about him, Mama. What do you mean? He knows things. About Papa. About the army. Things a stranger shouldn't know. Violet turned the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if Ezra had known her measurements by heart. Maybe he's just kind. Kind men don't carry secrets that heavy. But Violet had already chosen. Love, she told herself, was worth the risk of heartbreak. She'd buried one husband. She could survive losing another. The engagement announcement split Silver Creek like lightning. Some called it romantic. Others whispered darker theories. The grieving widow and the mysterious doctor. Too convenient. Too quick. Cornelius Blake heard the news in his office above the Silver Creek mine. Maps covered his walls, marking claims and holdings. Red X's marked the families who'd sold. Black X's marked the ones who'd died in accidents. Violet Washington's land remained unmarked, a stubborn blank space in his expanding empire. Problems getting complicated, Kane Morrison said, hat in his hands. Doc's got military training, won't scare easy. Blake studied the map, calculating. Then we stopped trying to scare them. 3 days later, the well water on the Washington homestead turned foul. Violet noticed it first, the bitter taste that made her stomach turn. Then Marcus began vomiting, his small body racked with fever. Mary followed, then James. Only Sarah remained standing, helping her mother tend the sick. Ezra arrived to find chaos. Children burning with fever, Violet pale, with exhaustion. He worked through the night, administering medicines, monitoring vital signs. By dawn, he'd identified the poison. Arsenic. Deliberate. Lethal if left untreated. Who would do this? Violet's voice cracked with exhaustion. Ezra knew. He'd seen the signs before, during the war. Wells poisoned to drive out enemies. Families destroyed by invisible weapons. But knowing and proving were different things entirely. I don't know, but I'll find out. He rode to town that morning, medical bag concealing the water samples he'd collected. Doc Henley's old laboratory still functioned, and Ezra knew enough chemistry to confirm his suspicions. Arsenic, military grade, the kind used in mining operations. At the Silver Creek mine, he found his opportunity. The foreman, a man named Peters, had broken his arm in a fall. As Ezra set the bone, he listened to the conversation drifting from Blake's office. Washington woman's getting stubborn. Doc's making her brave. Then we make them both sorry. Blake's voice carried the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. That land sitting on the richest vein in the territory. I've got investors coming from Denver. Won't let some widow and her do-gooder husband ruin 20 years of planning. Ezra's hand stilled on the bandage. The pieces clicked together like bones snapping into place. Samuel's death. The other mining accidents. The systematic elimination of small landowners. Not coincidence. Murder. What about the territorial marshal? Marshal's 3 days away. Plenty can happen in 3 days. Peters groaned as Ezra tightened the splint. Easy, Doc. Sorry. But Ezra's mind was elsewhere, calculating distances, timing, resources. 3 days to expose a conspiracy that had killed a dozen men. 3 days to save the woman he loved and the children he'd claimed as his own. He rode home to find Violet waiting on the porch, Marcus sleeping in her arms. The boy's fever had broken, but his breathing remained shallow. Guilt carved channels in Ezra's chest, deeper than any wound he'd suffered in war. "How is he?" "Alive, thanks to you." She studied his face, reading the tension there. "You know who did this." "I suspect." "Tell me." So he did. About the conversation he'd overheard, about the pattern of accidents, about the men who'd died for the silver beneath their feet. Everything except the truth that mattered most. Violet listened in silence, her arms tightening around Marcus. When he finished, she stood and walked to the window, staring out at land that had cost so much blood. Samuel didn't die in an accident. No. He was murdered, like the others. Yes. She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw something new. Not just love or trust, but the hard certainty of a woman who'd lost everything and refused to lose more. What do? We fight. That night, as her children slept, Violet sat beside Marcus's bed and made her choice. The town had been wrong. A man had married a widow with 4 children, but they'd been wrong about everything else too. Love wasn't burden, it was armor. Family wasn't weakness, it was strength multiplied by the number of hearts beating in unison. She touched the ring on her finger and whispered a prayer to the husband she'd buried and the one she'd chosen to keep. Let them both have the courage to face what was coming. Outside, wind rattled the windows like fingers testing locks. Winter was coming, and with it, the reckoning that would determine whether love was stronger than greed, whether truth could survive in a world built on lies. In his room, Marcus stirred and called out in his sleep. Not for his dead father or absent mother, but for the man who'd sat beside his bed all night holding back death with medicine and will. "Papa," he whispered, the word carrying the weight of trust and the promise of tomorrow. Ezra heard it through the thin walls and felt his heart break and heal in the same breath. Some secrets, he realized, were heavier than others. Some truths were worth the cost of carrying them, but not all. And time was running out to choose which ones to keep and which ones to confess before the choosing was taken from him entirely. The truth came at dawn like a fever breaking. Marcus lay dying in Ezra's arms, his small body convulsing as the poison ran its course. The experimental medicine Ezra had learned in the army camps was the boy's only hope. As he worked, measuring doses with trembling hands, the weight of secrets finally crushed his resolve. "I knew your father." The words fell like stones in still water. Samuel Washington, Buffalo soldier, 3rd Cavalry. Violet's hand stilled on Marcus's forehead. "What?" "He saved my life. Took a bullet meant for me." Ezra's voice cracked as he continued the treatment. "Last thing he said was your name. Made me promise to find you." The silence stretched between them, broken only by Marcus's labored breathing. Violet's face cycled through emotions. Shock, betrayal, understanding. Finally, something that might have been relief. "You came here for him," started that way. "Not anymore." She watched him work, seeing past the secret to the man beneath. The guilt he carried, the love he'd built from ashes, the way he fought for Marcus's life like it was his own. "Does it matter?" she asked. "Why you came? Does it matter to you?" "Only if you're staying for the wrong reasons." Ezra met her eyes over Marcus's still form. "I'm staying because I love you, all of you. Samuel would want his family protected, but that's not why I'm here anymore." Marcus's breathing eased. Color returned to his cheeks. Death retreated like shadows before sunrise. "Papa?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of acceptance, of choice, of a family reformed by love rather than blood. Ezra's chest tightened. "I'm here." Outside, hoofbeats announced the arrival of the territorial marshal. Ezra had sent word 2 days ago. along with evidence of Blake's conspiracy, water samples, forged documents, witness statements from minors too scared to speak before but emboldened by community support. The marshal was a weathered man named Crawford who'd seen enough frontier justice to recognize the real thing. He arrested Blake without ceremony, ignoring the mine owner's protests about influential friends and political connections. Kane Morrison tried to run, made it to the town limits before James Washington, 14 and fierce with protective anger, put a rope across the road. The outlaw's horse stumbled. Kane went down hard, dreams of easy money scattered in the dust. Sheriff Hastings found himself facing his own reckoning. The evidence of his corruption lay spread across Crawford's desk like an autopsy of greed. Forged papers, altered reports, blood money that had bought his silence while good men died. "You're done," Crawford said simply. The town gathered for the wedding 3 days later. October sun slanted through cottonwood leaves, painting everything gold. The same tree where Samuel had married Violet 20 years ago now witnessed her second chance at happiness. Violet wore her mother's dress altered by careful hands, simple, honest, beautiful in the way of things that endure. At her throat, Samuel's ring hung on a chain, not a replacement, but a remembrance. Sarah walked her mother down the aisle carrying Samuel's military medal. The girl had grown into her father's strength, her mother's grace. She placed the medal in Ezra's hands before the ceremony began. "He would have liked you," she whispered. Ezra pinned the medal to his wedding coat, feeling the weight of honor and responsibility. He wasn't replacing Samuel. He was continuing the work Samuel had started, protecting a family, building a future, loving with everything he had. The preacher spoke words about second chances and redemption, about love that grows from respect and shared burdens, about families formed by choice rather than blood alone. When he pronounced them married, Marcus cheered from the front row. Mary threw wildflowers. James managed a smile that looked exactly like his father's. The town that had once whispered about the widow and her burdens now celebrated love's triumph over fear. At the reception, old Mrs. Patterson cornered Violet by the punch bowl. "Guess we were wrong about you, dear. Seems the right man did come along after all." "He did," Violet agreed, watching Ezra dance with Mary while Marcus clung to his leg. "Though I think I was the one who came along for him." That evening, as the celebration wound down, the new family sat on their porch watching stars emerge. Marcus had claimed Ezra's lap, small fingers tracing the medal on his chest. Sarah and James flanked their mother, protective and proud. Mary leaned against Ezra's shoulder, finally relaxed in the safety of a complete family. "Tell us about Papa," Marcus said. "The first Papa." Ezra looked at Violet, question in his eyes. She nodded. So he told them about Samuel's courage, his jokes around the campfire, the way he spoke of his family with such love that other soldiers grew homesick just listening, about the day he died, and the promise that brought Ezra to their door. "He was a good man," Ezra finished, "more best I ever knew. Like you," Marcus said with the certainty of childhood. "I'm trying to be." Later, when the children were asleep, Violet and Ezra walked the land Samuel had claimed and Ezra had helped save. The silver beneath their feet would remain in the ground, their children's inheritance secured by love and law. "Do you think he knows?" Violet asked, touching the ring at her throat. "I think he's glad his family is safe." "And happy?" Ezra pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, the promise of tomorrow. "Happier than I deserve." "Deserve's got nothing to do with it. We take what love gives us and try to be worthy of it." They stood beneath the cottonwood where 2 weddings had been blessed, where promises had been made and kept. The wind carried the scent of home, of family, of love that had grown from ashes into something stronger than steel. In the distance, Silver Creek ran toward the horizon, carrying away the secrets and sorrows of the past. What remained was simpler, truer. A family built on choice and sustained by the radical decision to love completely, without reservation, without fear. The town had been wrong. A man had married a widow with 4 children. not out of pity or obligation, but because love recognizes love, and hearts that have been broken can heal stronger than they were before. Marcus stirred in his sleep, calling, "Out for Papa." This time there was no question which man he meant. The one who'd chosen them, the one who'd stayed. The one who'd proven that families are made not just by blood, but by the daily decision to love and protect and build something beautiful from the fragments of broken dreams. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.